I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hi, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast.
Santa Rosa 911, you need police, fire, or ambulance?
Yes, I need an ambulance at
Okay.
as fast as they can get here.
Can you tell me exactly what happened?
I'm not sure. Somebody's hurt really bad, though. I need somebody to get here as fast as they can get here, please.
Okay, are you with them now?
No, I've got my little girl, and I'm trying to get her down to the neighbor's house so I can get back up there.
Okay, how many people are hurt?
It's one person.
Okay,
Hurry, please.
my partner's getting help on the way. I got a few questions for you, okay?
Okay.
How old's the person?
48.
Okay.
Please hurry.
Male or female?
Female.
Okay, is she awake?
I don't know, sir.
Okay, is she breathing?
Sir, I don't know. I gotta get back up there. I gotta get my little girl to somebody's house. I gotta get my little girl at a neighbor's house.
Okay, can you tell me what happened? You know anything about what happened?
No, sir, I can't. No, sir, I don't know what happened. I haven't been in there. I'm just trying to get my little girl to somebody's house.
Okay.
And I'm gonna get back up there as fast as I can. Come on,
Okay, well, I want you to stay on the line with me while you're doing that, okay?
Okay. Yes, sir. It is an emergency. I need somebody here as fast as possible.
And we got everybody on the way, okay?
Okay.
Is there anybody else in the house with her?
Sir, I haven't been in there yet. I just opened the door and found her in the floor.
Okay. I need you to get back to her as quick as possible, okay?
Yes, sir, I'm going to get back to her as quick as I can. You're going to be okay, Dennis.
Okay. All right, everybody's coming as quick as they can.
Can my little girl stay here with you? I've got an emergency. And is there anybody else that can come with me? It's right up here.
It's okay. Let me know as soon as you're right by her, okay? I need you to breathe for me and focus, okay? I'm gonna help you, okay? Tell me as soon as you get back to her.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Take some deep breaths for me.
I can't.
Take some deep breaths for me. Look at her. Is she still breathing? You with me?
I hear that coming.
Do you see any weapons there?
There's a knife in her hand.
There's a knife in her hand?
Yes. No.
Take a deep breath for me, okay?
Please, please.
They're coming. Everybody's coming as fast as they can. Is there something there that you can put over the wound, a clean cloth or towel? Is somebody there with you?
Is there anything you can do, sir, please?
Is that the fire department there with you?
No! want to listen. Oh, sorry.
Take a deep breath for me, okay?
I did it. I know he did it. He's driving a 97 Lexus. No. Hang up now. The deputy's here. Everybody else is here. Can I please hang up?
Is your little girl okay?
She's down. Listen, 3 doors down. She has no idea what's going on.
Okay, make sure you tell the sheriff's office where your little girl is, okay?
Sir, my little girl.
I'll let you go now, okay?
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
And that is the 911 call that started it all. Joining me now to talk about this case is Pam Hill, pharmacist and advocate for victims, because clearly she has experienced violent crime in her own life. That call was about her sister, Sharon Aydelott, who was brutally killed at the hands of her own son, Brandon Aydelott, when he was just 17 years old. That was Christmas Eve of 2013. He stabbed her, stomped her, bludgeoned her to death with a baseball bat that she bought him, with a knife that he brought from his dad's apartment, right there in the doorway of her home. The last word that she said that Brandon told his aunt is help. And here we are 11 years later, and Brandon Aydelott has now been recommended for a step-down facility. He has been serving. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity, placed into the custody of the Department of Children and Families. This was back in 2016. And now the Department of Children and Families says that he no longer meets the criteria for commitment at Florida State Hospital in Chattahoochee, which is where they send the criminally insane. They say that he is no longer a danger to himself or others. He's no longer showing signs of psychosis. This is not the outcome that Sharon's family wanted, certainly not her big sister here, Pam Hill. Pam, we were at that hearing on Thursday. You were actually called as one of the witnesses when the judge was considering the reports from several psychologists who basically testified about Brandon's mental health and why they were making this recommendation. And what they did was recommend that he go to Apalachee Center, which is in Quincy. That's in the Tallahassee area of Florida, if you're not familiar. And basically, it's a secure facility. He'll be on lockdown 24/7 initially. And then, of course, the goal with all these programs is to eventually get patients as independent as possible through the use of medications and therapy and various other programs. This is not a surprise, but I know it's a disappointment to you that that was the decision.
It's surprising in a different way, almost like gobsmacked surprised, because in the very beginning, Bill Edens told us that Aydelott will never get out. He killed his mother, for heaven's sakes. So that's what I've been thinking of, and it's almost like someone's going to have to pinch me in a bad way, because it just still doesn't feel real.
Right.
Because we're sitting up there, I'm watching the psychologists testify, and as I sit there, I'm thinking, they've only spent an hour with Brandon, or this one's from Chattahoochee, or this one, nobody asked me for any input. That's why I'm glad I was allowed to testify.
Yes, I know that had to take a bit of a weight off, and I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I will at least let our audience know that the 3 psychologists that testified was one, Dr. Resch, who treats Brandon as part of his treatment team there at Florida State Hospital. So she is one of those that testified as well for the court. And then the state went and got 2 other additional experts. One is a man that apparently testifies regularly on behalf of the state. And he's the one that I thought that was interesting. He was like, I spent an hour with him and I agree that, he's good to go. And then you had another woman that came in and stepped in. And I thought her testimony was, to me, some of the most compelling of the 3 psychologists. She agreed with them that he was no longer a danger to himself and others and not showing signs of psychosis, had reviewed all of his reports going back to when he was first found not guilty by reason of insanity and prior to when he was first charged. But she did say, and I think also it's important to mention that Dr. Resch, one of his primary persons on his treatment team, both of them said this is contingent on the fact that he is going to a secure facility, that if he weren't going to a secure facility, they might not be making this recommendation to a step-down facility. And that the third psychologist who testified said that she also went and looked up the statute as far as what she was supposed to be looking for in regards to him being released, not released to the community, right, but released to another facility. And she said, again, that he had the propensity for violence if he didn't take his medication. And they all agreed to that. So it's necessary that he takes his medication for the rest of his life. They say that he understands that and will do it. But as we're about to get into,
there was other testimony that would indicate, and you were among those, where he's had some concerning behavior. Even the judge said when he made his decision, it's concerning to me that Brandon was found with a box cutter as recently as 2021, something that was called contraband, considered contraband there at Florida State Hospital. He had taken it, he had hidden it. They caught him with it. They asked him why he had it. And he said it was because he needed it to defend himself from other patients there. And of course, Dr. Rush said that it's not unusual for patients to get in fights. But at the same time, that's concerning because considering the way that he killed Sharon and going back to that 911 call, that was the very night that he killed her. And he told you, he also told the investigators that voices in his head told him to kill his mom and that he started looking for a weapon in his dad's apartment as soon as his father left with their younger sister to allegedly go get a last-minute Christmas gift, which was an unusual sort of circumstance as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. But at any rate, he said he went to find a gun, couldn't find a gun, so he grabbed a knife, put it in the passenger seat of his car, drove 2-3 miles down the road, past several stoplights, had any opportunity to change his mind, or listen to any other voice than the one that was telling him to murder his mother, kill his mother, because he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. But that being said, then he hides the knife up his sleeve and starts stabbing her as soon as she opens the door. Her bloody handprints are on the door where she was clawing, trying to get out. And then he went and got the baseball bat that she bought him. He swung on her so hard, it broke pieces of her teeth and jaw. And it was found across the room on the credenza, blood splatter everywhere. These are gruesome details. They are not meant to be salacious. It is just to show the sheer violence. And it's hard to reconcile. I think a lot of people do have a heart for mental illness. But how do you separate? How do you truly know when someone's choosing to listen to these voices, and at what point are they, and I understand that the law is fairly black and white, but to say that he's not guilty by reason of insanity, that's to say that he didn't commit this murderous crime, but he has been, at least in the eyes of the state, seen as a killer, so he can't technically benefit from her crime. But in the eyes of the law, he's not a criminal as far as what he did to his mom.
Right. Well, interesting listening to psychologists. I've been a pharmacist for 37 years, so I've heard my share of clinical teams and of teaming up and going before the patients and bedside and all that stuff. And I know medicine better than anybody in that whole room.
Yes, and you talked about that. Now, when the prosecutor, Mark Alderman, called you to the stand to tell the judge basically what your conversations were like, because you went to visit Brandon Aydelott many times over the years. He was the one that requested that you be his primary person to help him with his treatment, and he didn't reach out to his dad. He didn't tell the care team at DCF to talk to his dad. He said, I want my Aunt Pam. She makes me smile. And he was not being cooperative. He was not taking his medicine. You talked about that on the stand. But you also, at one point, reached out to me and said, I want you to come with me. I feel like there's more to this story. I want to know what really happened. I don't entirely believe that it was just schizophrenia that caused my nephew to do this.
Right.
And so I want people to understand that, I've been involved in this for a number of years. I have gone with Pam to visit Brandon. I've gone through that process of being patted down and going through the security and getting on the list. And when we first started talking to him, and was it 2017? He I think there was a part of him that was just hard to reach.
Right.
And I don't know if it's the medication, if it's the mental illness, but it's like whoever Brandon was, to me, seemed like he was down deep in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something, because going down there is an experience. Just like you said, you're patted down, you're in Sally ports, you can't take this and that in, you have to dress a certain way. And so I had been going before you and I went together, and you go sit with your sister's killer. And so I'm sitting there trying to play checkers with him. And then at one point when he reaches over to touch me, I have to get up and go to the bathroom to vomit, because I thought, that's the hand that killed my sister. And that's what my mind was going back and forth with court, thinking, y'all sure have sanitized this and disinfected it to where, he takes his medicine. He's never complied without extra prodding and doing and stuff. Oh, it's just a box cutter. He didn't use it yet. Well, we know he's handy with a weapon. He just told everybody what he did with a knife he brought from his dad's, a baseball bat, and his stomping her face. I don't understand that. It's just like reading a syllabus or just reading a story. If to tell this story and see if he's well or not, I get letters from Chattahoochee all the time that tell me about my son.
Right. So you don't put a lot of credence into their opinions.
I don't, because you can't even get in touch with them when you're standing on campus. I wanted to talk to them. And that's what the defense attorney was asking me. Well, did you talk to the treatment team? I'm not on the treatment team. I have written the administrator and the lawyer there and the counselors and stuff. I talked to the state attorney's office. The state attorney's office, Bill Edens, the one that told me he would never get out. Now, if that's the case, here we are, though, 11 years later, and it's become so sanitized. I'm like, I almost want to go, hey, does anybody remember what he did?
Right. I know. And you talked a little bit about that on the stand as far as like the concerning comments that Brandon made to you, which is why that defense attorney said, hey, did you report some of these concerning comments to the staff? And I think to your point, your thought was, well, you were talking to him every day.
Yeah.
I assumed you guys were keeping on top of what these things were.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily your job to report those things. But what were some of the things that he said to you when you would go to visit him? And you saw him before, again, I was a part of those visits, and then you saw him up until about 2019.
He had told me, I'm not through killing my family yet. And he had told me he had a hit list and told me the 3 boys in Gulf Breeze that are on it. He told me where the trap houses are in Gulf Breeze, and they're still there. And he told me about the spice and how they were buying and selling the mango kush and the thunderberry kush. And he told me who's over there selling it and how each of them got like a dozen little cases that they do.
Let's backtrack for a minute, because folks who may not have followed previous episodes of Mommy Killer 1 and 2, which outline what happened, you were paying for Brandon's cell phone, so you had access to his texts. You saw where it looked like he had suspected drug deals that he was selling and working on behalf of another person that he knew, another student at the time there at Gulf Breeze High School, is what he told you. And that they were selling marijuana, and you suspected it was that synthetic marijuana. And at the time, that was easier to get at local convenience stores. It was also causing symptoms that were very similar to schizophrenia. It was causing psychosis in patients. In fact, I interviewed a psychologist with one of our local treatment centers who said at that time they had to create a special ward for the young people and individuals in general that were taking this spice. And it was causing such a break with reality that it was causing symptoms of hallucinations. They were seeing things, they were hearing things. It was very similar to schizophrenia, but they didn't necessarily respond right away to the psychotropic drugs, if you will, the antipsychotics, that it would just take a while because it's all affecting your neurology. So I don't think there's any question that there is mental illness. I don't think there's any question that his neurology was impacted. You would have to be quote unquote crazy or mentally ill or sick in the head is another way to put it, to do what he did with Sharon. But I think your point is he did it with such purpose that there is method in the madness, that even if he was hearing voices, that one of those voices he told you was his father's. And in fact, it was his father who found Sharon Aydelott just minutes after Brandon left her there in a bloody pool on her front door.
Yes, it was. And the voices that he heard, he had been kind of texting and writing kind of some bizarre stuff to a girl that he was seeing. And it was
daughter
bizarre.
of another teacher, Sharon worked.
Right. And any time that any behavior came up, Sharon always addressed it. Sharon loved Brandon so much, and he loved her so much. We asked Brandon about, well, were you mad at your mother? He said, no. It is so bizarre. But the other things he told me, I'm not through killing my family. I've got a hit list of these 3 boys. And he went to go kill one of them right after he killed Sharon.
One of his best friends. Up
And he
until
wasn't
that
home.
time.
Thank God he wasn't home.
Yeah.
But Brandon's bloody handprints on their door because he went there. And then he said the voices that were talking to him had asked him, why didn't he just go ahead and kill Biz, his sister?
She wasn't there yet.
Right. And then one of the other things he told me when we're there, I have a brown eye and a green eye. And we were sitting, all I can do with him when I used to go visit him would be play some little games. Like I got out the memory cards to see if he could match them up like you do for about a 6-year-old. He wanted to play chess. I don't know how to play chess, but He taught me, and those kind of things. And then he's always made fun of my eyes, not in a bad way like kids do,
Right.
He said, he would he'd tell me, he'd say, "Hey, brown eye, green eye," and then he'd laugh and stuff.
Yes.
He was an adorable kid. And so he said something, he said, the only brown-eyed people are the bad guys, and only blue-eyed people are for him and on his side.
And for those who don't know, Sharon Aydelott was a beautiful woman, 48 years old, popular teacher at Navarre Middle School, Holly Navarre Middle School, and she had brown eyes, and he buried a knife blade, 2 of them, one in the top of her skull and one in her eye socket, and she was unrecognizable. In fact, we interviewed one of the first deputies on the scene, and he said that he initially, just to look at her face, you wouldn't know if this was a man, if this was a woman. And she was a very vibrant, loving mother and woman, by all accounts, by her family and by her friends and by her principal. Joey DeStefano, who I understand is devastated and disappointed by this opinion. And this decision, I do think that there was some, I would like to think, validation for you and the opportunity to get up there and talk about that and talk about your conversations with Brandon and to be heard, because I do think the Judge Clifton Drake, did listen. He listened to the testimony of all 3 psychologists. He listened to Pam get up there and talk. Elizabeth Aydelott, we'll get to that more in a minute, but she also got up there and spoke on behalf of Brandon, requesting that he be released to the step-down program. And then the judge took a break, and he came back after about 30, 45 minutes, and he said, I've thought long and hard about this, and the first thing I want to say is I want to acknowledge just the horrific and traumatic way that Sharon Aydelott died. The gruesome, violent way that she was killed is bad enough, but she also had to experience knowing she was going to die at the hands of her own son. He goes, and I couldn't imagine. And that's me basically paraphrasing what he had said. So in that part, I feel like it's good. It's good to have some acknowledgement to the family that I'm aware of this.
Right.
And then he went on to say, but we're still going to go ahead and grant him, I agree that he no longer meets criteria for commitment at Florida State Hospital, so we're going to go ahead and release him to Apalachee Center. But he did say that he changed some of the terms of basically this contract, that Brandon would go in there, and initially it was going to be in a building or a part of the facility of Apalachee Center that was going to be open, unlocked 14 hours a day. So essentially like a regular person. We all go to work. We all do whatever. I'm not saying he was going to be allowed off campus, but it was an unlocked facility 14 hours a day. So, we all lock our doors at night when we go to sleep. So, or at least most of us do, I would imagine. But so that was the change that he made, that he would have to be in a part of that facility that was on lockdown 24/7, and he could not be moved from a 24/7 lockdown facility without a court order. So I think that in some ways that, it's small acknowledgement, if you will. It's not nearly what you wanted, but I did feel like at least you were heard.
He heard me, and I think anybody that's in this position like I am, a victim of a heinous crime or any crime where there's injustice, it does all become about the offender. And I mean, I'm grateful for him for saying that, but I personally think that needs to be in the record every single time. Because when I did my statement, I said, we're not here for a bad check. We're here because he savagely killed my sister beyond recognition, almost decapitated her. These are things we're still living with. We have spent so much, and by we, I mean my family, and I also mean taxpayers too, and anybody that lives in the state of Florida. We have spent so much time and folly making sure Brandon gets what he wants, his rights, this, that, and the other. Sharon had rights. Like you said, Sharon's a beautiful, vibrant woman, and this was not deserved. Nobody deserves like this, but this is the ultimate because she loved him more than anybody.
Right. And that was something that I thought was interesting when Biz got up there too. And that's Elizabeth Aydelott. She's going to be 21 in September. So she was only 10 years old when this happened. And she got up there and just basically read from a prepared statement that was about 4 or 5 minutes long. And you can talk a little bit about what exactly she said, but one of the points that she made that really took me by surprise was when she said not one adult. She basically blamed the mental illness, Sharon's murder, her mother's death, if you will, on Brandon's mental illness, and said that he was showing signs of psychosis, but quote unquote, not one adult, end quote, stepped up to do anything when they saw it. And that is blatantly false.
Oh, yeah.
The investigative record shows numerous texts between Sharon and Randy. You can check out many of my other episodes that go into a lot more detail about this. But in a nutshell, I've seen the investigative files. I've seen the text between Sharon and Randy Aydelott. I've seen the text that Sharon sent to the family doctor, Dr. Brad Hawkins. She was begging for help from Brandon. The school system knew about it as well because he had punched another kid when he was apparently starting to have psychotic breaks and hearing voices. The girl that you mentioned that he was texting some crazy crap to, we've got copies of those texts. He clearly was unstable. She did not let Sharon know. So she was not an adult, but you can say that, you know, every member of Sharon Aydelott's family did. You were there. You videotaped the intervention that she led after he punched that kid in the face. And that's what I started to say. That's why the school was aware of it. Sharon was called down there because the kid that he punched, his mom worked for the school. And she said, listen, I'm not trying to ruin his life. I don't want to get him arrested. But he cold cocked my son as he got off his shift from a pizza delivery right in the middle of the parking lot. Made some weird comment about contracts and then punched him. And this kid is somebody he thought was also fooling around with this girl that he was sending all these weird texts to, who didn't bother to tell Sharon she was getting them. So, yeah, people knew. But to say that not one adult, maybe her dad didn't do anything. And that's clear in the record. He even told the deputies that were interviewing him after Sharon's death that she was an abusive mom. You know, he just... That's been his narrative. And maybe it's a response to trauma. Maybe as a child, she had no other recourse emotionally but to hang on to the lies, essentially, that her father was telling her, in my opinion.
Well, she's been estranged from us to the very night, Christmas Eve night. Randy's sister told him and Biz to come stay with me, which is fine.
And that was Dana Aydelott?
That was Dana. And she's an attorney, and she works for the FBI, so I'm pretty sure she...
And she was there first on the scene, she and Randy.
Yeah, they were there, and they cuddled up in the car there. You know, so there's a lot of things that are wrong, and that's why I told myself I'll never put this down, because... This is what we've talked about with every case. Somebody starts to create the narrative. Randy said so many cruel things that were inaccurate and wrong. And he'd say straight, I don't want to talk ill about the dead, but, you know, he's the one
But he went right on and did.
And he's the one that wasn't taking care of his children or helping with this, that, and the other.
Brandon was living with him at the time that he killed Sharon.
Yep. And with Brandon, and when Brandon was talking about the contracts while he punched the boy at the pizza place trying to just do his job, Brandon's been babbling on about the Illuminati and a goddess they have over there in Gulf Breeze, and so much to where one of the counselors around went and talked to the state attorney's office and went and interviewed some of these people, but everybody wants to keep their kid's name out of it, but there is something to it.
And I imagine it's a lot like one of the other episodes that we've done on Gulf Coast Confidential. We covered when Leslie Van Houten, one of the people that was involved in the Charles Manson, those terrible killings.
Yes. And
she is out on probation. And I think if anybody can identify with how you feel, you know, and vice versa, it's you and that family, you know, or the victim's family, because just like you, this case, she kept requesting probation, and that's her right over and over. But every time she does, the families have to relive it. And here she actually was granted probation.
Right, she was. And they said, well, she's got a master's degree and this, that, and the other. Wait, why come everything that gets said about these people, we conveniently forget? You were with Charles Manson and you killed the LaBiancas and you stabbed them and wrote their name or some words like pig on the wall. You dipped the thing you killed them with in their own blood and wrote it on the damn wall. Yeah. Let's talk about that every time. Now, what I do feel good about, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get mad, but what I do feel good about, there is a Marcy's Law now that is for victims. And if you're a victim of any kind of crime, you need to look that up, because we are entitled to certain things like protection and to be able to be in the courtroom, and things are coming back. Our system has swayed way too far where the victims are nobodies and it's all about the offender. And that's what, sitting in court the other day, I was like, how can you sit? I hope you value your careers when you're sitting here putting your money on this boy right here that lived a charmed life, and you didn't even come ask me and know these 4 things I just told you, what he said. He's not through killing. So when he does reoffend, and he will, then we're going to come back to you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I know they talked a lot about this, the testing that they give him, the standards that they base their decisions on. And, I'm sure that they are 100% accurate as far as what they were saying, that he is passing these tests, that he is abiding by the rules that they put in front of him. But I thought you brought up an interesting point when you were like, yes, I'm sure that's true too. However, he also is smart and he knows how to tell people what they want to hear. So
Yes,
again,
exactly.
we go back to, yes, he was hearing
Right.
voices and hallucinating at the time that he killed his mom, but why did the voices tell him to kill his mom? The one person that was actually trying to get him help. Because again, if you go back and listen to Mommy Killer 1 and 2, he was resentful over the fact that she led that family intervention that put him in a treatment facility. And when the treatment facility came back that he passed his drug test, his dad was right there, took him out within 48 hours, basically saying, we can't afford to keep him in there because insurance won't cover it now that he's passed his drug test. And you stepped up and other members of Sharon's family and said, we'll pay for it. And the text shows Sharon said, please don't take him out. Please keep him in there. Even if he passed a drug test, there is clearly something wrong with him.
Right.
And Randy's response was, no, I think he was just upset because he thought that girl he was dating, the one that he was sending crazy texts to, was fooling around with him. And he goes, and I believe Brandon. So basically, and I perhaps I'm jumping conclusions here, but I'm a parent. I know what it's like to, be in a situation when you're talking with your child about the other parent. It sounds to me like maybe whenever he was with Brandon, he was so, and this is based on numerous interviews with family and friends, Randy Aydelott appeared to want to be more Brandon's friend.
Oh, yeah.
Even in the video in the intervention, he was concerned about saying something that was going to upset Brandon or make Brandon mad at him. And we know from the 2010 sexting incident that Randy Aydelott had with the 14-year-old girl in his science class at PHS that he is not very quick to take responsibility. He even tried to basically blame that on Brandon at the time as well. So I feel like there's a pattern of behavior here that shows that Randy wants to live vicariously through Brandon, that he treats Brandon almost like a friend. And for Brandon to show these signs of psychosis and problems, which he, again, it's in the investigative record. He told the deputies who interviewed him after Sharon's death that Brandon was showing signs of problems and that they had suspected it might be spice, that he kept him in these little tobacco snuff skull containers. But then he turned right around and said that, Sharon was always riding him and that, that she was abusive to him. And that is not true. Basically, Sharon was worried about him. And the reason he wasn't living with her anymore is because she did see something was wrong and she'd been trying to put down rules. She didn't know that it was schizophrenia at the time, but he was being defiant. He was being oppositional. He was being violent with her. He was shoving her. He was shoving other members of your family, being aggressive. There were just a lot of bizarre behaviors. To a family that's never experienced that before, you're not going to immediately know that it's schizophrenia, but you're going to know something's wrong.
Right.
The only person who was saying, let's not do anything about it was his father.
Right.
And then you turn around, like the reason I even went down this road is because I feel like, yes, he heard voices, but there's a reason that he did what he did.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we can just subjectively say schizophrenia is this blanket, yes, lots of people do experience it and they do things that are unexplainable and it's tragic and sad, but it makes sense to them and it makes sense to them for a reason.
Right.
And I feel like in Brandon's case, it made sense for him to do what he did because in my opinion, based on the research that I've done and what I've read in the investigative files, it's not a stretch to believe that Randy, and again, this is based on numerous other paperwork that I've not even talked about yet, when he was constantly filing court orders at Sharon in the months leading up to her death, when Brandon was living with him, he wanted to no longer pay child support for Brandon. He wanted to move with Brandon back to his hometown in Flomaton, Alabama. This is all documented in the court records. He was saying there's too much drug use in Gulf Breeze. He said he had a job lined up in Flomaton, that Brandon was going to be able to get on the football team there and really make up for, he had all these plans. But so to me, his goal was always to be with Brandon and to never have Brandon mad at him.
Yeah.
And again, going back to living vicariously and not wanting to upset him, he didn't put his son's health, in my opinion, mental health or well-being above what he wanted from Brandon.
No,
and he blamed Sharon so much based on the documentation of the domestic violence reports, based on the court records, for him getting busted for sexting that 14-year-old. Instead of taking responsibility himself, he blamed Sharon. And I feel like that poison spread to Brandon's attitude towards his mother. He starts using drugs. It starts affecting his mind. It changes his neurology, if you will, based on what those psychologists were saying. It altered his thinking. And yet it didn't alter it to where he says, know what? These crazy voices are just randomly telling me to kill people. I'm going to go kill the convenience store clerk. I'm going to go kill. No, I'm going to go kill the mother, the one that's actually been advocating for me. I'm going to go kill other brown-eyed people who happen to also be his closest friends. You know, again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm just saying from the outside looking in, based on what I've read, it seemed like the father's influence on top of what this kid was doing to himself really created a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And Sharon paid the price.
Oh, she did. She was the currency of his mental illness. And I'm not ever going to let people say, well, they killed somebody, they're mentally ill, no harm, no foul. You know, that's not mental illness. That's forensics. That's evil. Now, that can coexist at the same time. Two things can exist at the same time. Plenty of us have something that could be considered mental illness. I've got PTSD from this and anxiety. And a lot of people do, and we have to learn how to manage it. But the thing with Brandon is that Randy was so mad at Sharon because the people over at PHS were willing to basically just, let's just hide this.
Try to cover it up. And if you want to know more about that, check out the episode Confessions in the Field House. We detail everything from the moment that those sex inappropriate texts were discovered to how Randy Aydelott ended up losing his job and everything that happened in between, which is a lot.
It's a lot. And that's when Brandon hated Randy for doing that because he told me, he said, Aunt Pam asked Pawpaw, my daddy, how to change my name to Hill because he tried to go get a job and he came home and he cried and cried and cried to Sharon. And he said, I can't get a job. Everybody knows what he did. And Sharon got so upset and hurt. She took him up to a business in Gulf Breeze.
A local restaurant.
And Sharon said, he's upset about this, that. And they said, well, we'll give him a chance. Now, that same place is exactly where he stood up there and sold drugs out the drive-through window. Now, and as far as the test goes, spice doesn't pop up on test. And it's sure hardly any drugs are going to pop up on the little $4 test that they give in rehab when they're just kind of getting people through. Drug tests cost money, too.
Well, and y'all had given him a drug test before you had the intervention. Again, that was supposed to be something Randy was supposed to do, but he couldn't or wouldn't do it, so you stepped up
read
to
it.
did it.
Yeah, I read it because Randy came to the pharmacy where I was working and said, will you come give Brandon a drug test? So Randy gave him the test. I read it, and he did have opiates, Xanax, or benzos, and he had the marijuana there. So the other, I don't know what test they gave him. I saw it with my own eyes there. So, and then he was laying on the couch, and I have this on video too. It's him laying on the couch, and he is so spaced out.
Yes, and constantly messing with his nose.
Oh, doing this forever. And then he couldn't even walk. So taking him, here's what I want to know. Is it mental illness just when it's convenient for people? Because that was some outright mental illness that Randy wanted to take him out. If it wasn't drugs, which it was both, it could have been both. Because a lot of these things, they can be drug-induced.
That's right. Like I was saying at the time, I talked to somebody from one of our local treatment facilities who said that they had to create an entirely different section for people that had taken spice and were exhibiting breaks with reality.
Oh, yeah, because it is unmanageable. That is like, big time aggression and violence. I mean, I can't even imagine having to deal with that.
Well, it's interesting, too. This hearing was Thursday, just a couple days ago from the time that we're recording now. And that same day, the vice principal of Pensacola High School was arrested for basically video voyeurism on a 17-year-old woman, a young girl, if you will, 17-year-old young woman. And now she's in her early 20s and discovered this video evidence basically of this vice principal, Sean Colby, videoing her inappropriately at different times. This was not on school campus, but he is a vice principal of that school. And I thought that was so interesting that happened on the same day that Brandon's hearing about whether or not he should be sent to a step-down facility. because we all know that so much of what happened with that family really started in October of 2010 when Randy Aydelott was busted and ended up losing his job for sexting that girl. It just created chaos and trauma within the family. It's why Randy Aydelott filed for divorce and left. He was angry that Sharon Aydelott wouldn't co-sign on his excuses and his attempts to cover up what he had done. And he divorced her as if he were the one that was being victimized. It was just interesting.
Yeah.
But it's the break that started it all. So to hear that this guy at PHS gets busted for doing something that was in some ways very similar to what Randy Aydelott's predatory behavior was. He was never arrested. He was investigated. But again, check out Confessions in the Field House. He was investigated by a detective for the Pensacola Police Department who actually had a son that was currently being coached on the PHS football team. And she basically said and has told me that they had private meetings about what Randy Aydelott had done before she ever was even assigned the case. And the attempt was basically to put it off on the girls who had found the phone with the texts and accuse them of trying to extort Randy Aydelott as opposed to going after Randy Aydelott for the texts that they had found. So it was about the cover-up, if you will.
Exactly.
And so it made me think of so many other cases, and you've taken the trouble to write a lot of them down, and some of them that we've done right here on this show. But Mark Luau, a teacher at Washington High School in Pensacola, also busted and arrested and imprisoned for preying on students, one after the other. You had Ryan Walsh, a youth pastor at Gulf Breeze United Methodist and Gulf Breeze as well, preyed upon a young lady there, a minor. And then there's just several other ones too. And I know we've talked any number about a lot of these cases here on Gulf Coast Confidential, but this is why we like, I know maybe some people feel like they don't want to hear about the Brandon Aydelott case anymore, the Sharon Aydelott case. But it's still very much happening, as we know, just based on the hearing. And also, it's your experience in dealing with the justice system or the lack of justice system in some cases that I think draws us to so many of these similar cases.
Well, the thing with all this, too, is the court, the school, you look around and go, that's not right.
How are all these other people not seeing this? Or if they are seeing it, why aren't they doing something about it?
But we just go, oh, well, look what happened with Sharon. 10-10-10 is when this happened where Randy's sexting that girl. And like you said, there is so much more to that. And that is in the education report also on the investigation of Randy.
Oh, yes. There's many investigative files on that.
You will get sick reading that.
Yes.
Then you can read the domestic violence injunction with Sharon, where he's pulled out a gun, brandishing at her, going, do you know what I'm going to do? I know people get sick of this sometimes. This is my life. And nothing I do from now, I'm 65 years old, nothing I do from now on is going to help me or my family or Sharon. It can dang sure help somebody else to not have to go through all this agony that we're going through.
Right.
And that is what I see right now at PHS with Sean Roby. Now, if the
Yes,
drill,
I think I said the name wrong earlier. It's Sean Roby.
And if the drill is, we've already seen the drill. It's not ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, aim, and cover up and huddle up and act like it didn't happen and you're a liar for saying so. And these girls right here get sent to a girls' school. Let's create a fracas. And they do. And what makes me so upset, just like any other case, when you got grown folks standing around co-signing on this behavior, not finding a problem with it. This is what caused my sister to get killed. Randy's venom came over. Like I said, Brandon hated him, but he's brilliant at turning it around. Look what he's done to my niece. He's had 10 years to turn her against our family. The way he started was he estranged her. He isolated her. He talked crap about us. It's a formula. It's a formula that people that do alienation of whether it's grown people or children, it's what they do. And everybody stands around looking like we're idiots. I will never go into court and act like that's okay. Even when the psychologist said, well, I don't have a crystal ball. Well, I thought that was quite assy to say at the end of a thing and unprofessional. So that's his way of saying, but if he kills again, I told y'all I didn't have a crystal ball.
We did the best we could based on the information that we had at the time. But yeah, I know. It's very, it was shocking to hear Elizabeth's, she was very pretty.
Yes.
She reminds me of Sharon.
I love her.
Well-spoken, but very tiny voice, like a little girl voice. And it really struck me that maybe emotionally she might still be 10 years old.
Yeah.
Because I know you know better than I do, and we won't get into too many of those details, but she was not probably given the right kind of counseling for a long time. I don't know if she's ever really had the specific kind of counseling that she may really need to properly grieve her mother, because it seems like the focus has just been so much on defending Brandon from the moment that her mommy died. And the fact that her father had her living in the house where Brandon, her brother, violently killed her mommy. It's as if you're saying, without coming out and saying it, her life didn't matter. We can live here now. I mean, Randy's life changed and benefited exponentially from the moment that Brandon killed Sharon. Everybody else is suffering around him, but suddenly he's out of the cheap apartment that he was living, never could really get a full-time job again. He did have here and there, he worked some, different bellhop. I think he worked at a, home improvement store for a while, but he certainly didn't get back into education. And now I believe he's, from what I understand, he's on disability, or at the very least, he's not working. But he's been living off of this child and the money that she received from her mother's death. So, life did not get worse for Randy Aydelott.
No, it
even
got
though
better.
Sharon's ended.
Yeah, it got better. It was a good fundraiser, I reckon. And so, and he also taught Brandon how to go ask for half of Sharon's inheritance, too.
That was unbelievable
Yeah,
to me.
and the house there, it just went downhill, went in foreclosure 4 times, and not to get...
Took out that illegal $40,000 loan.
Yeah, and I still have that. And I'm never going to stop pursuing that either. And as far as her therapist, I'm going to continue that as well, because there are 4 families that have contacted me that she has done the same thing to their families. What she does, her MO, is to go against the woman and buddy up with the man. Doesn't matter what, and then talk bad about the family. So when people that know how to talk bad, if we don't push back, if you don't help other people and push back, you're going to be off by yourself and no one's going to help you.
And I think that's another reason why we do all these stories in this podcast that drive these similar themes home. It's about holding people accountable in the positions that they're in, because this therapist, for example, the one that you dealt with early on that Randy Aydelott hired to help Biz, basically she helped alienate you guys from Elizabeth Aydelott. And that, again, creates a cascading mental health effect on Elizabeth, on all of you. It's about the court system. It's about understanding what your rights are. It's about creating, like you said, telling your side of the story and getting it out there so that people understand. I think about when the story first broke, how it was, they were arguing, they'd been fighting, he just lost it. And that is not true whatsoever. That is the very first story that went out internationally. This case was so sensational, it made headlines. And that was the version that went out, that they were fighting and he lost it. And, but that's not what happened. He had voices in his head, came straight from his, in my opinion, bitter ex-husband, his dad. He was upset that, he wasn't basically, I guess, going to this party that Brandon had been invited to, church services and party for the family that y'all normally have. And that's just my opinion. I don't know, but it does seem like Randy was upset about something that night. When Sharon brought Elizabeth by unexpectedly, he unexpectedly takes her to go shopping. Brandon unexpectedly shows up on Sharon's doorstep armed with a knife. He unexpectedly has these voices telling him to basically assassinate his mother, which he did. And he did it very thoroughly. So, but basically that's why you have so much experience in this. And these cases are all different, but a lot of the situations are the same. If you are a victim of a crime, if you're a victim of any sort of abuse or an abuser, there are people within the system that can help you. And then there are people who are professionals that may not be giving you the kind of help that you need. And you need to recognize the signs. You need to be able to find someone who can advocate for you if you can't advocate for yourself. How you go ahead and avoid the pitfalls that you've already been through because of everything that you've been through with this case.
Right. And that's where I found myself. I know if I didn't know the Lord, I wouldn't be here. Because for 3 years, it was I just got up every morning and prayed, God, show me what to do. And he basically showed me, just get through the days right now. Just put one foot in front of the other. And then I started learning more about grief. And that the kind of grief that one has going through this is called disenfranchised grief, and it's not realized by a lot of other people. But then that's when I called or sent you an email because I said, I need someone that cares about people to help me.
Yes. And we've been following this for a long time. And again, this conclusion of this hearing does not come as a big surprise. They had been saying that he was trending that way, that they were recommending that he be taken to a step-down facility, that he no longer met the criteria for commitment. But he will continue to be evaluated every 6 months. The court will receive those reports. Again, he cannot be moved from a 24/7 lockdown facility without a court order. So I think those are positives. But all in all, what's not positive is that this is progress towards what the ultimate goal could potentially be, which is release back into the community.
Right. And I think people don't realize, or maybe they do, you have to play every inning, play every snap. You can't just go, oh, well, it's going okay right now. There's no letting up on it, because it's kind of hard to say I'm happy about it, because I'm not, because I was told he would never get out. I'm going to keep saying that forever. And then also he killed my sister. And then the fact that he has never shown one bit of remorse, not one.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting too, he's been at the Santa Rosa County Jail, so they had to decide how they were going to get him to Apalachee Center, and Florida State Hospital had to step up and say, well, we'll take him back to us, and when a bed opens at Apalachee Center, then we'll send him there. So apparently there's not space at the moment, so he's going from the jail back to Chattahoochee, and then from there they'll take him to Quincy when there's space available.
Well, it's just so interesting to me that he can go just anywhere. We can make rules and changes here, and when he's in the courtroom, there's deputies all around him. He's handcuffed, he's leg shackled, he's belly shackled. The deputies have guns. They have a security system and cameras everywhere. And that's where he is when he's signing the paper to go there. But he will not be like that when he's out.
Yes, that's the big concern. A lot of folks, not just Brandon, but do they want to take their medications when it's up to them to take them?
He won't, because he told me that all he needs is Benadryl. He said, I'm not going to take it. All I need is Benadryl. I tell them what they want to hear. And being a pharmacist, I see that all the time with people in regular situations. But when people are put on psychotropics, the first thing they do when they get some freedom is stop taking their medication.
Well, we will see what happens with Brandon Aydelott. But Pam, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share after this hearing?
I just thank people for hanging tough with us and supporting us. I appreciate that.
Yes, and we appreciate you. Thank you for joining us on this latest episode of Gulf Coast Confidential, Mommy Killer 3, Brandon Aydelott moving through the system. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and fabulous production engineer, James Roy. Remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hopefully this is one of them. And you can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.